a similar but more satisfying take on It Comes at Night. Welcome, this is The Underhold. My name is Sinclair. My Twitter handle is Illegal Priest, and this is my little talk on a movie called The Wind. It doesn't seem to have very much play. It doesn't seem like many people have seen it. Doesn't have a terrible amount of reviews, but it's free on Showtime right now. So I guess not free, but if you have Showtime, it's part of that subscription. So I saw it on the Xfinity app when I was looking for horror, and then I just looked on IMDb and I was like, okay, this looks like a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes score, but not for critics, but not so much for just general movie going public that posts. So you do see differences. I guess you would put this in more of a slow burn horror that some people would say, or art house A24 type horror. It's definitely in that vein. I kind of don't like the term slow burn horror because sometimes it makes it sound like nothing happens, and I usually believe in most of those horror films. Stuff usually does happen at a good clip. Maybe not in Gretel and Hansel. Sometimes that actually does tend to go a little slow. But on something like The Witch, I felt like there was a lot of stuff going on there, and that's how I feel about this too. Is that there are actual stuff when you look into it. I guess slow burn in some ways means if you're not stuck in a theater just staring at a screen, maybe it's easier to get distracted because that can happen to me. I am watching on my phone, so that does prevent the phone distraction a little, but my mind can wander, especially thinking about other things in life as well. Uh, I will get into spoilers at some point, but I'm going to stay away from them at first. This is the type of story that goes into a little bit of, is everything going on in a person's mind? What is real? What is not real? And in a lot of this vein, this is why I mentioned It Comes at Night. That was a good portion of what It Comes at Night was about. Wasn't even just the main character. It was like a lot of paranoia going on in a lot of people's minds and things like that. But this has some parallels to It Comes at Night. So I think about that movie a lot more. But I mean, you could even say there's some similarities. Let's say The Boy. I just did The Boy 2 review, but Boy 1 has these moments of, is the doll possessed? Or is this woman going crazy? And so this has that a little bit, and it's a small cast. It's a western. You have basically a couple that lives in the frontier west, so they definitely seem to be like newly settling land. They are pioneers, and uh, it starts out with a traumatic event, and I think this is where it shows the deftness of the writing and the directing and editing. Is there's a very traumatic, very horrific moment essentially in the opening scene, and it jumps a little bit time wise without getting confusing to let you in a little bit more and a little bit more on what actually happened during that event. And this movie is time jumpy, but it's actually very easy to keep together what's in the past, what's in the present. Probably wasn't too hard necessarily because it just has to do with how many people are in the scenes. Because there's probably four main-ish characters tops. Everything else is like almost non-existent as a character. That's the main thing. And even from then, it's still mainly the woman, and then maybe you could put her husband as the secondary or the other woman as the secondary. But it is mainly Caitlin Gerard, who is phenomenal in it. Her performance does a lot for it. Uh, she's very, very natural in front of the camera to where I feel no stiffness, like very comfortable in front of the camera, which helped the scenes where things had to be heightened. She had to be scared and more tight and pent up, more effective. Uh, and speaking of women being in this movie, this is also like a largely female production when it comes to, I saw in the credits, female director, another female writer, so that's just really cool. All those people, if I start seeing other stuff of like from somebody, who did The Wind, I'm gonna take a look if they're the writer or director and really follow up on that. Good editing because you don't get confused, and good sound design. It's called The Wind, so obviously when there's stuff having to do with is somebody crazy and things like that, there's going to be mind tricks, and sound design and stuff is very good too. So that definitely helped. Um, I maybe liked it more than I think most people saw online, or who saw it looking at their reviews online. But I would say, as opposed to something like It Comes at Night, it felt a lot more satisfying. And I guess you would say I'll get into spoilers next. So, but overall, a more satisfying It Comes at Night. It's a Western. It's done very well. Highly recommend. All right. So we're going to go into the next section of spoilers and some of the more interesting things I thought were happening in the film. Okay, so now we're in spoiler territory. Um, the beginning of the film starts out with a very traumatic moment of essentially I think you have the four main characters, which you do find out are the first couple that's there in the frontier, and the new couple that settles nearby, and they are coming to the house, I guess panicked or something, but very much like, we need help. The woman's inside. Um, you get the idea that a baby is gonna come. The baby was probably stillborn. So you're like, oh, that's a horrific thing. And through showing up the cleaning up of or that the mom's dying in childbirth. So you just slowly find out more, like, you think the mom's dying in childbirth and has the kid maybe, but then the kid does turn out to be stillborn. Sorry, I'm having a harder time putting it together than it actually comes across on film. It comes across very well on film, and I'm still learning the YouTube thing of how to explain things well. Uh, but through her cleaning up the mess, you realize, oh, they brought her in pregnant, but she was already deceased. You even see later that they're burying a body, and she didn't just necessarily die while in labor. She's missing part of her head. So, and that the baby wasn't just stillborn, she actually had to cut the baby out. So it's just layers on layers of trauma in that moment are pretty heavy. Um, but then, these people, the two guys, her husband, and who you find out is the husband of the woman who died and had the child, um, they go off to essentially take care of what needs to be taken care of when somebody passes away, unfortunately. Get some people to get their belongings again, some stuff like that. And that's where a lot of the stuff comes in of, is her being alone, having visions or hallucinations. Basically, is she being haunted? Is there a haunt? Is there a demon? What is going on, or is it all in her head? And then it transitions a little bit to um, when the other couple ended up moving near them. And so you see a little bit of this narrative of her currently by herself going crazy or whatever is going on, and what led up to this point of her being alone. And that unfolds very, very well. Um, I would say, since we're in spoiler territory, it's a satisfying movie to me, even though a lot of stuff like It Comes at Night sometimes isn't very satisfying. Of, like, is there a creature? Is there a demon? Or is somebody crazy? I kind of feel like it's all of the above, which ultimately means there's probably a demon and stuff. Demons. And you find out, well later on, that it's actually a preacher that gives out these along with some Bibles too. So you get the idea this stuff has been possibly happening a bit. there's a lot of foreshadowing or just little clues that maybe either this area just makes people crazy or there actually is demons and stuff because there's a lot of dead bodies along the way or, graves. There's an interesting way they use a grave site later, finding out that it's the grave site of a baby that the Caitlin Gerard's character miscarried. So there's just lots of little pieces like that I liked. And then when they showed the demon pamphlet, you have this moment of like this woman, Emma, the neighbor, talking about each demon's name and how they work, of like jealousy and things like that. So it's not even necessarily like some of it would be like tricks of the eyes. So in some ways, like in history and interpreting history, sometimes it's like people can't think of how to explain a phenomenon they have, so attribute it to a demon. So that's how some of this works a little bit. Maybe it's a literal demon, but maybe it's also just that's how they're categorizing these phenomena. Uh, and stuff like there's a lot of dancing around things that happen. So there's the jealousy. Wife's back, so I'll do a small little editing here. But there's just dancing around situations of like, hey, maybe Emma slept with the main character's husband, and maybe it's their child, but it's very deft in the way they dance around those possibilities. And it's very clever in how they edit and write in those moments of did somebody sleep with somebody, or what could possibly be the underlying issue of like, is the demon working in a jealousy way or in a way of visions and things like that. So it's just very clever in that way. I actually think it's very well woven. So even though online you'll see a lot of like 50%, a lot of people really writing it off as like, oh, it's just a crazy person or something. I think it's a lot more complicated than that, and I think it's a lot more satisfying than that. So I do tend towards the 80% Rotten Tomatoes review. So I feel highly underrated, a hidden gem. Check it out. Check out Caitlin Gerard. She's a great actress. A lot of it hinges on her great performance and anybody else who worked on the film. So that director, that writer, if you start seeing like from the writer of this or from the director of this, I would definitely give them a look. Other than that, thank you. Bye.